Okay, so who do we have here today? We have Heather from 606, the treasurer. We have Holly from number 40 Snowbirds, Moose Jaw. Holly, are you the treasurer for 40? Oh, the chairperson. Who else do we have here? Bonnie from 574 Dakota. Bonnie, are you the treasurer or someone else from the executive?
Secretary.
Oh, secretary.
Longtime secretary.
And we have Eliza from 40 Snowbirds treasurer. Oh, so we have a couple from number 40. Let's see. Oh, Tara Johnson from 34 Roland Groom, parent volunteer. So Tara, are they planning to recruit you to the executive as well? Oh, they recruited you to treasurer. The treasurer is a fun role once you get the hang of it. Okay, so who else do we? Okay, so on the call, this is who I have. I have, well, Larry Sennett. He's a director from the Provincial League, as well as Wayne Goldfinch, who's also a director from the Provincial League on board. I've got Heather from 606, Harvard Squadron, who's the treasurer. Got one more. Oh, it looks like she must have got kicked out. Then I got Bonnie from 574. Eliza from number 40 and Holly from number 40. Tara was from 34. And you said Nelson is from 702?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, so we have a few squadrons here to. Oh, we got. Are some of you having troubles like being kicked out and having to come back in?
I'm not, but I have to log in twice, once for my phone for the sound and once for my computer. This is mine.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. That makes sense. Yeah, so this is where we'll get started. Today is going to be a fairly informal session. I just want to, actually, I should ask, how many of you are new to the treasurer role? And feel free to speak up on the odd, like with your voice, or if you want, just type it into the chat box. Okay, we have one new treasurer. Yeah, it looks like we're getting a couple of, some of you are brand new to this role. Oh, we have an experienced one, 3 years. Heather from 606. Okay, so we have a mixture today. Now, what being in the role of treasurer, this is where it can be quite overwhelming if you're not quite sure what to do. And what I want to try to do is kind of step you through what you need to be concerned about when you take over the role of treasurer. Hopefully you got some help from the previous year chair or treasurer that they can give you some guidance. But you're going to be dealing with several forms. And one that we'll be talking the most today is called the ACC 9. It's a reporting form that the Air Cadet League at the national level requires all the squadrons to submit each year for statistical purposes and just to monitor the financial health of all the squadrons. And I'll be going through that uh, uh, later on here after I do my introductory comments. Now, the ACC 9, normally it's due usually end of October, or that's when we would like it to be due. But considering we have this little thing called COVID that's playing havoc with our training schedules, I know I'm being a little bit more flexible this year in terms of when getting it submitted. Considering we actually have some squadrons that don't even have a active parent committee at the moment. They're still in the process of trying to put one together for the year. So this is where I encourage you to get the ACC 9 done as quickly as possible. That, like I said, that's just for reporting within our Air Cadet League organization. But there are some other forms you have to be more careful about because there are timelines involved that may not be so flexible. So once you do the ACC 9, that's usually your starting point. That kind of gives you your base financial information. Then you need to take a look, ask, is your squadron a charity, a registered charity with CRA? And right now, there's only about 11 or 12 squadrons, I believe, or maybe a couple more, that are actual registered charities with CRA, and they can issue their own um, donation receipts or charitable receipts. Now, for those squadrons, there's a deadline there that you need to respect. You have to file a charity return, a T3010. Now, fortunately, a lot of this information can be pulled off your ACC 9 form that you've already created. Another organization you got to be aware of is the ISC, or the corporations branch. Because right now, about 2/3 of the squadrons are incorporated, but there's a handful of them that are behind on their filing status and they've been struck off. And that's not a good thing to be struck off, because technically, if if you don't get your financial statements into ISC and the annual report and you get struck off, legally, you're not allowed to do business in the province of Saskatchewan. So technically, you shouldn't be operating actively as an SSC then. So it's important to get reinstated back with ISC. Also, we do also have about a third of our squadrons that are not incorporated at all. And with the changes that CRA wants the Air Cadet League to make over the last 2 or 3 years, this is where I'll be working with those squadrons individually and helping them get incorporated, because that's going to be a requirement going forward, is that all squadrons in Saskatchewan needs to be incorporated. So this is where the paperwork's not so bad to do that. It's just a matter getting an initial board of like a board of directors for that squadron. And that's where, if your squadron is short on volunteers or people willing to step up to be to the executive, that's where we may need to come up with some solutions for that. But this is something we'll work on over the next 2 to 3 months, so that we can be all in place by the start of the next training year, which hopefully will be somewhat getting back to normal. So now another application form that you definitely need to be aware of if it applies to you. I believe it's either 6 or 8 squadrons in Saskatchewan that they've been grandfathered for a Sask Lotteries grant. This is a grant that the squadrons has been receiving for quite a few years. Now, this grant is no longer available to to new organizations. Um, the squadrons are all grandfathered in. They were set up with that beforehand. There's a form which actually should have been filled out by, I believe the deadline was last November, but it's important to make sure you get that form sent in because you don't want to run the risk of losing that grant because there, from what we understand, if you don't get your forms in and you lose the grant, it's going to be lost forever. You won't be able to reapply for it. So these are some of the forms that you need to be aware of. So the first one is the ACC 9. And this is where what you need to do to get that one done is you need to do your bookkeeping. Now, the ACC 9 form, especially the new version, but also the old version does this, it allows you to enter your income and expense receipts directly into the spreadsheet, which would then populate the financial statements that you need. Many squadrons just do it this way. But this is where you don't, well, at least up until now, you don't have to use the ACC 9 to do your bookkeeping. You could use a regular accounting program if you wanted to. Uh, and then you could take your numbers from the accounting program and transfer it into the ACC 9. That has always been an option, and there are some squadrons who do that. Now, moving forward with this new version, this is where they're not making it as easy to do that. They've got more things protected within the spreadsheet, but it's still possible. If you use an external accounting program, you could just transfer a summary of the numbers over, just so that the key financial statements that have to be submitted has the numbers in it. So this is where you need to do the bookkeeping, however you do it. Once you do the bookkeeping, this is where if you're an incorporated entity, this is where you need to check to see if you're required to get your financial statements audited or reviewed, or you just need a compilation. There's three different, like in Saskatchewan, or actually across Canada, there's three different levels of assurance when it comes to verifying your financial statements. And in Saskatchewan, the cutoff is about $25,000. If your total revenue is from the previous year is 25,000 or less, you don't require to get an accountant to review or audit your financial statements. Rather, you could have your parent committee just pass a motion saying that we waive the requirement to do a review or audit. Now, if your squadron has between $25,000 and $250,000 of revenue, which is, I probably would say, where the majority of our medium to larger size squadrons are, this is where normally you have to get an audit done unless the majority of your parent committee waives the requirement to do an audit, and then you can have a review done. So this is where with a review, you typically would need to find an accountant that's able to do this. Not all accountants are able to do reviews and audits. Like, for example, like I have a public tax accounting practice, but I can only do compilations. I'm not licensed, my firm is not licensed to actually do reviews and audits. And that's actually quite a common scenario. There's only a handful of firms that are public accounting practices that actually do reviews and audits. And there are some firms out there that just do reviews only. They don't do audits. So you will need to ask like if you have an accountant in mind, you will need to make sure and ask them, are they licensed to do a review or audit? Now you need to be a bit careful because there's a lot of confusion right now. There's actually two acts that are kind of conflicting with each other at the moment. You have the Corporation Act, which was the old rules, which basically said you could get almost anybody to do a review for you. They just had to have bookkeeping experience or and such. and they had to get approved by ISC. But about 5 years ago, Saskatchewan implemented an act called the Accountants Act. Part of it was they took all three accounting organizations and merged them into one. So now there's only one accounting organization, the CPAs. But they also put in the requirement that only a licensed CPA firm that's authorized to either do reviews or reviews and audits are allowed to officially do those within Saskatchewan. So I know I do come across people who say, oh, we don't need an accountant to do the review. And technically, that might be the case under the old rules, but under the new accounting standards, yes, you do need a licensed CPA accountant to do a review. So I know the government is currently working on resolving this confusion. ISC, if you ever ask them, they're just going to refer you to the website and say it's up to you to determine if your accountant is properly authorized to do this. Basically, they're taking a hands-off approach to this issue. They don't want to get involved, and they don't have the manpower to regulate this. But this is where, just keep in mind, you do need to get a licensed CPA accountant in order to do a review and audit now in Saskatchewan. So this is where you definitely need to get that done. If your year ends August 31st, typically then this review or audit, if you need one, will be required by the end of January in order to get it submitted to ISC in time and to do your annual return with ISC. Likewise, that's about the same timeline that your charity return with CRA is required.
Can you repeat that date, please, Brian?
Yeah, you need to look at your own specific situation, but typically you probably need to get this paperwork into ISC by the end of January or possibly the end of February. It all depends on the exact date of the annual return that ISC has for your organization. Now, most of our squadrons, or I believe all of them, they have a year-end date of August 31st, along with the provincial committee. So this is typically, like I know, who is it? 606. Yours is a little different. That's where your dates are different from most others, because if I remember right, I believe 606, you're actually incorporated at the federal level, not at the provincial level. Like there's two ways you can incorporate. Either one is fine, but most squadrons usually incorporate provincially because they're not going to be operating outside of Saskatchewan. So with the federal incorporation rules, theirs is slightly different. It's more based on the I can't remember the exact date. It's been about a year and a half since I talked to someone at 606 about this. But yeah, it's basically based on the I think the day that you registered.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
it's based on when we incorporated in January, but we report our August year-end financials.
Yeah, so it kind of plays havoc with how you have to report things.
Yes.
So it's and when you have your annual meeting. But this is where you just have to look at the detail. Because as I mentioned, one of the biggest problems we have at the provincial level is I'll do a scan, like I'll go to ISC and do a search of all the existing corporations, squadrons that are incorporated. I'll see quite a number of them have been struck off. In most cases, they never filed their annual return. And this is where, if that's the case, then I have to find out why were they struck off? Was it just because they didn't want to be in a corporation anymore? Most cases, it's because they didn't know they had to do this filing. There was a transition in the executive and the treasurer roles, and the new people coming in didn't know about this requirement. And sometimes the paperwork gets lost in the mail, and they just get struck off without knowing. And as I mentioned, that's not a good thing because legally you're not allowed to do business then. So this is where I'll be contacting squadrons afterwards. I got to renew the list to see what this current status is, and I'm going to be taking a look like who needs to get their ACC 9 in yet. I've got a handful in that I'm just starting to review. So if you've got yours in already, don't panic if I haven't gone back to you yet. I'll be doing that over the Christmas holidays. I'll be taking a look at who is incorporated at the moment and the current status. So if you are incorporated, but you're listed as being struck off or inactive, this is where I'll be contacting you because we need a plan of action to get you reinstated again. If you've only been inactive or struck off for the last 1 or 2 years, then it's just simply a matter of refiling your financial statements for those years, and we can get you active again. But I remember I've got a couple squadrons where they've been inactive for about 10 years now. And that's a little bit more of a dilemma, because in order to get brought back on board, they would need to provide 10 years of financial statements. And if they're over the $25,000 limit, they would have to be reviewed financial statements. That could be like a $15,000 to $20,000 expenditure, depending on their accountant. In that case, we may actually need to look at the prospect of just reincorporating a brand new corporation and starting from scratch. And then finally, for the ones who have never been incorporated, like Larry with Lanigan, that's where situation you're in, I believe. You've never been incorporated. We just have to look at setting up a new corporation then for your squadron.
574 as well.
Yeah, 574 is a relatively new squadron. Where was the original location? Nipawin?
Choiceland.
Pardon?
Choiceland.
Oh, Choiceland. Yeah, so that's where, like, I know with 574, we would need to get you incorporated. And then the other step then is once we get you incorporated, you're going to be assigned a business number by CRA. Then you're going to have the option of getting a charity number. And this charity number is where we definitely have a lot of squadrons that used to have a charity number, but they never filed the charity application, and they've been revoked by CRA over the years. So this is where a practice that used to be more common was that if a squadron was getting a donation from someone and they wanted a charity receipt, they would phone up Richard and say, can you give us a charity receipt from the provincial level? And CRA is starting to clamp down on that practice. They don't want one charity organization issuing receipts for the benefit of a non-registered charity organization or nonprofit. In the past, they used to be more tolerant of it, but they're starting to clamp down on charities for doing that. So this is where, if you think you want the ability to be able to issue registered charity receipts, you do need to get your own charity number at the squadron level. In the short term, if you do have a case where someone is donating a large amount and you want a receipt, talk to Richard. We might be able to do something in the short term. I know we just did something with Swift Current on that respect. But this is where we're going to be encouraging, if you expect to have charity receipts, we need to get you a charity number. And that's where, in that case, just contact me. I've got an application for kind of like a base application package from National League. This has been part of an ongoing 2 to 4 year project where we're trying to negotiate with CRA, because what happened was when a lot of the Air Cadet Squadron, and this is across Canada, when they started forming, they were all set up as just nonprofit organizations. They weren't incorporated. And this is going back to the 1940s when the Air Cadet squadrons first started getting formed. Over the years, squadrons started to incorporate on their own. So all of a sudden, we had a whole mixture of squadrons. Some were incorporated, some were not incorporated. Some had their own charity numbers. Some was using a charity number under the Air Cadet League of Canada charity account. It was a whole mixture. And CRA did not like this situation. They wanted us to adopt a uniform procedure on how our squadrons dealt with the CRA and the various programs. So this is why we're in the process of getting all the squadrons incorporated, because that's part of the process of adopting the CRA's guidelines. Now, initially, the National League was insisting that everyone gets a charity number. But I've talked to the person in charge at National, and I've explained that, yes, we're getting everyone to register. They'll each have their own federal business number. And there really is no need for them to register as a charity if they don't want to be a charity. The only restriction, though, is you won't be able to issue charity receipts for donations. And another opportunity you may miss out on is you won't be able to claim a GST rebate. Because when you are a registered charity, you're allowed to get a rebate back of 50% of all the GST that you pay on your purchases throughout the year. So that could add up to $300, $400, all the way up to $800 or $900, depending on how much expenditures your squadron has. Like if you take your cadets out on an Easter trip somewhere, yeah, it doesn't take much to ring up a lot of GST that's being charged in those expenditures. So that's another benefit of getting a charity number. If you don't have a charity number, there is a rebate for nonprofits, but this is where you need to have 80% of your income coming directly from a government source. And with us, with most squadrons, they don't meet that criteria because a lot of their money is from fundraising, which doesn't count as part of that 80%. So in order to get the GST rebate, you need to get a registered charity number. So that's kind of a highlight of all the paperwork that's required. This is where if you have any questions at all, just give me a call. I'm going to be contacting the squadrons that I know is lacking something. Like I know, I'm not going to get into details, but I know there's a couple squadrons on the line here. I believe there is one or two that has a missing charity return from the last 2 or 3 years. Some squadrons might have been struck off. There's an assortment, and I'm just revising my list. I made up a list a year ago and just let everyone. It was at the last January zone meetings that we had. I handed out packages to all the squadrons indicating what they were lacking. I'm going to be doing an update just to see if there's been any progress made or whether it's actually a few more items have to be added to that list. Are there any questions? I've been just rambling on here.
Hi, it's Holly from number 40 Squadron.
Yes.
I was just wondering, is there a way that we can search on the ICS website to see if we are incorporated?
Yes, yes, there is. Well, actually,
or if there's a way we can search, like,
I can just let you know right now.
oh, that'd be awesome.
I'll just bring up my list from last year. It'll just take me a minute here. Of course, I can never find it handy when I need it, but I know I've got it here. Okay, squad. Okay, just found it. So for number 40, yes, you are incorporated, but yeah, your squadron was one that looks like it was struck off.
Oh, great.
And it looks like it was struck off, at least from what I could tell, about 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
So this might be a situation where it might be best just to reincorporate you as a new entity,
I agree. Yeah.
because like to get, well, to most squadrons, they have a hard time getting 2 or 3 years of paperwork, let alone 10 years worth.
Yeah. I think that would be the best bet. So if we want to do that, what's our first action we need to do?
Probably contact me.
Okay.
Take a look at your bank statement and see what the official name is on your bank statement.
Okay.
That might give me an idea if in the past they know they were struck off and they're operating under a different name, or whether they're still actually operating under an incorporated name, which usually then has the word LTD or INC or something along that lines at the end of your at the end of your name.
Okay. Great.
But and also you do have a charity number as well.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. And just to review, if we do have a charity number, there's other paperwork we're supposed to do on a yearly basis?
Yeah, there's a charity return, 3010
Oh.
usually needs to be completed. I believe in your case, it might be the end of February, might be the date.
Okay.
End of January for sure, and possibly into February.
Okay.
And you last year you were current on that too.
Oh, that's good.
Did anyone
Thank you.
else does anyone else want to know their current status? Okay. Oh, 34. Yeah, Tara, you're from 34. Is that correct? Okay, so 34, I know you're incorporated for sure. And you, at least as of a year ago, you were active, but I'll be updating that. You do have a charity number, but in your case, and again, I'll need to check. I know I let someone know last year there was one return. It was a return from about 2 years ago, I believe, that was missing. It wasn't filed. So that's about the only issue I found with 34 was it was just like there was just one missing return. I think it was for the August 31st, 2018 year. But I can double check on that to see if it's been filed since then, or I can let you know directly about that. Anyone else?
702 have theirs all ready to go in the next day or two.
Okay. Yeah,
Just finished.
702. Yeah, I know I believe they've been incorporated under a couple different names in the past.
Yeah, that has happened, yes.
Because I know when I first looked up their information, it looked like they were struck off, but then that's when found out they incorporated under a different name.
I did have it's Holly from Moose Jaw again. I just
Yes.
had one other question. For the Sask Lotteries grant, you mentioned that some squadrons are grandfathered in. I'm
Yes.
presuming that number 40 is not. How
Yes,
would I find that info?
that's where I'm not sure. I know some of the squadrons that have it, but I don't know all the squadrons.
There's
Oh,
only
okay.
about 6 that are left. If you're grandfathered in, you would be getting a check from Saskatchewan Lotteries every 6 months.
Yes.
And you get a letter stating that this has been deposited into your account each time.
Oh.
And then they'll also send you a package out to fill in for the required information by date. So probably you're not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
Like Larry, do you know which squadrons?
I only know about 3 of them. No, so I don't know them all anymore. No.
Yeah, I think I know about 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's actually, there's, I think, a couple smaller squadrons.
It's mostly what it's the rural squadrons, and they got grandfathered in because they got set up originally to deliver the lottery tickets out to all the different places around in their area. And the funds, they get a percentage of the fund based on what the ticket sales were back then.
Yes, it's a nice grant to receive if you're lucky to be getting it, and you don't want to lose it, because if you do, this is where it'll likely be permanently lost. Any other questions? Okay, just one last form I'm going to mention. After today, when I talk about all these forms, you're going to think twice about being a treasurer, but it's not so bad. And just keep in mind, you can always like email our office, Richard at the office, and he can always redirect things to me if necessary. But he's a good resource for information too that's available throughout the day. But this is a new form. I've been introducing it over the last year and a half. It's called an affiliation agreement. What's happening is, it was almost exactly a year ago, the National Air Cadet League and the provincial, like Saskatchewan at the provincial level, and all the provinces had to do this. We signed an affiliation agreement, which lays down the framework of how we operate. Essentially, we have the National Air Cadet League as the parent organization, and they set the majority of the guidelines and rules. And we agree to abide by those rules within our jurisdiction. And now we have to do the same type of form at the squadron level between the squadron and the provincial committee. So essentially, it's a form that just basically says you agree to abide by the policies set out by the National Air Cadet League and anything that we may set out at the provincial level. And then you just agree to abide by those rules. Also, there's another page in there where we ask that you provide us a complete list of your executive and their email addresses. In fact, you probably should be getting contacted by your local director from the provincial league asking for this information as well, if they haven't done so already. Basically, we're trying to compile a database of contacts for each squadron. One of the issues we've had at the provincial level is we are trying to reach out to squadrons with important information over the summer, and I believe only about half the squadrons responded throughout the entire summer. So we're trying to improve that so that we can get timely messages out to squadrons. Like, for example, one of the things that happened this year was D&D actually supplied more LSA money. That's for those of you who don't know what LSA is, it's essentially the grant that D&D provides to help cover up some selected expenses. Before, it used to be a lot of sports related, but a year or two ago, they changed it so it could be for any cadet activity. or covering rent for your facility. And they made extra money available, but there was a deadline of June 30th. So we were trying to get the message out to all the squadrons to apply for this money while it was still there. I don't know what percentage of squadrons actually applied, but we always get some squadrons that never apply for this free money. And it's all they have to do is just show receipts, and D&D will reimburse them up to their allocated dollar amount. With COVID, um, unfortunately, I think we're probably going to be seeing extended shutdowns. I can't quite see. Um, I can't quite see the D&D allowing us to parade in person for a month or two. Hope it would be nice if we could, but I'm sure if COVID numbers keep getting worse, that they're going to be they want to be on the cautious side when it comes to cadets and COVID. So this is where it's going to be important for us to be able to communicate with squadrons, especially when the squadrons aren't that active at the moment, just to make sure they're aware of any changes that they need to know about. So that'll be an agreement I'll be sending out to all January. We're planning to have another set of area meetings, like virtual area meetings in, I believe it's the first week of January. I don't think the invitations has gone out yet, but it's usually the first Monday and Tuesday of the month. As long, yeah,
January
so I
4th and
believe it's going
5th.
to be January 4th and 5th.
Brian,
I know this last.
your screen is frozen, so if you're recording it, maybe check something.
Okay.
We're hearing you, but you're just sitting there.
Oh, okay. I'm going to switch computers then. Yeah, I don't want to tamper with this main computer. Okay, I'm going to just switch to I got two computers running at the same time. Okay,
You see that one?
yeah, you should be able to see me on my other screen now. Okay, yeah, and I'll have to share on this screen. Okay, so, what time, how are we doing for time? Okay, so what I want to do now quickly is just give you a quick showing of the ACC9 form. I'm going to have to download it on this computer. Just give me a minute to do that.
I can see you are 8, but that's, yeah.
I don't think it's okay. I'm going to have it up and going here in just a minute. The joys of technology. Okay.
Scudder.
You've got you can see my spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay, so this is actually a brand new version of the ACC 9. Here, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my main computer crashed completely here. So I think good thing I had my laptop running as a backup. So yeah, so this is where um, with this new ACC 9, they've incorporated a lot of new features into it to try and make it easier to use, but also try and make it more of a comprehensive product that you can use to run the finances in your squadron. Now, initially, you have the data set up, and this is where you would just enter the ending information from the previous year. Now, a good place to start with would be your last year's ACC 9. And if you don't have a copy of it, especially for those of you who are new to the role, just ask Richard or I, and we can email you last year's ACC 9 for your squadron. And basically, that's where you just enter your ending bank balances and such, which become the opening balances for the current year. A new feature is a credit card. This is where squadrons before we weren't allowed to use credit cards or debit cards because it broke the 2-signature rule. But I know I was able to actually push through an amendment to to the National's policy procedures to allow us to use credit cards within certain conditions and like being extra cautious on how they're being used. So we are allowed to use electronic payment cards now. So there's an entry for that. And again, based on last year's form, what were total assets, retained earnings, the revenue surplus, and so on. So you just enter last year's information. This is where you got to make sure you enable everything. This program uses macros in the background heavily. And if you don't enable them, you'll find features won't work or won't calculate properly. Now, where it's similar to last year is when you have your deposits, you could just enter your deposits under the revenue tab. It will allow you to break it. You basically enter the total amount of the deposit, and then you allocate it to the various income categories. Make sure that you do it a transaction type, like bank is probably the most common one. Because otherwise, if you don't enter a transaction type in the second column, it won't show up under the detailed transaction listing if you want a transaction listing for the month. That's about 2 tabs down. Likewise, again, you just make sure you fill in the details. Then it's going to give you this proof of category allocation. If it's not 0, that means you never broke it out exactly what it's for. So this is just an error check. After you're done allocating it to the columns to the right, it should be 0, which means you allocated the full dollar amount. Most squadrons don't have to collect GST on anything. Usually we're under the limit. I know on the expense side, there's this GST where you can break out the GST portion of your expenses so that you can collect a rebate later on. And then this is where you have the various categories. These are standard categories. The ones that are pre-developed, you probably don't want to change because they're meant to match up like with the charity return and the ACC 9 form. But there are some where you can customize the headings to match up with your squadron's financials. Like for example, under gaming and fundraising, that's where you can enter a column for each of your different fundraising activities. So you could track the income and expenses for each of them separately. Now you only have so many, but for most squadrons, that probably should be more than ample. Likewise, on the expense side, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of listing your expenses. One of the things is there's an account here. This is where if you have multiple bank accounts that you write checks from, you can indicate which account it is here. That way it goes against the right account. Because one of the other things, this is the transaction listing screen. This is where you could just indicate which period of time you want the listings for. Like say, for example, you're doing your monthly parent committee meeting and you want to show what expenditures and revenue you had for that last month. You can indicate that month and it'll list everything below here. Now, one thing I noticed, it gives you a recommended date format, but I think it's actually based on what the date format is for your computer setup. Because right now I have to use, I think it formats it, but I believe when I enter the data, I have to enter it as year, month, day on my computer in order for it to work properly. So this is where you may have to experiment. If it gives you an error message, just try entering the date how you normally would do it in other programs on your computer. When they said this, but they have here day, month, year, but I think that's how it was set up on their Windows setup. So just be aware of that. There's a reconciliation, like back on the revenue and expenses, there's this first column where when you get your bank statement, you can just check it off saying, yes, it's gone through my bank account. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, you can do a year-end reconciliation to make sure that everything balances properly. And you can do this for each one of your bank accounts that you have set up in your system. Like if I scroll down, it just shows multiple accounts. Then there's a summary here. Basically, it's the same information, more or less. Now, these brown buttons, a lot of these are new features. Okay, there's actually, oh, they made some changes here. They used to have more reports. Yeah, they have a built-in budget tracker because usually a good practice is develop a budget for the upcoming year. Now, this is something you don't do as a treasurer alone or as a part of a parent committee, but usually you want to get the CO and the officers involved in this process. It's usually a joint process where you discuss what your training plans are for the next year and what kind of expenditures and revenue you expect to have. Just it's a good planning tool. And then later on, it'll give you reports indicating like how you are compared to your budget. Like actually right here, they'll say, here's your actuals year to date and the difference. So you can use it as a planning tool.
You can pick a lot of that information from last year's ACC 9.
Yeah, that's a good starting point for your budget, is your last year's numbers. There's an area where you can list your investments. If you have GICs, that's probably the most common investment most squadrons have. There's a D&D claim tracker. This is more like for LSA money, keeping track of your submissions for LSA, because they do have certain expenses they require you that they will only reimburse. So this could be a way of keeping track of that throughout the year, rather than scrambling at the end of the year. Or right now, actually, they were asking for LSA receipts as of November 30th. This is where you can just make a list of what you have available that meets their criteria.
Hi, Brian. It's Holly from number 40. Sorry for my ignorance in this. Could you just explain a little bit like about LSA and how that process works? I don't even know what it stands for.
That's a good, was it local squadron allocations?
Correct.
Yeah, I believe that was it. What it is, it's money that D&D has made available to squadrons. In the past, usually it was geared more for sport-related activities. I couldn't remember the exact breakdown, but I think it was like, it had to be like 75 or 80% was for sports and 20% for other things. In the last, I believe it's been 2 years now, this is where this LSA money can be used for any kind of expenditure that meets their requirements. It's not just sporting related. Like I used to be the treasurer at 41 for 3 years. And that's where we always had a challenge. Okay, how can we spend this money in sports related? We only need so much volleyball equipment and so much of this and so much of that. We were much relieved when they basically removed that requirement. So essentially, this is where the key expenditure that they'll cover cadet activities, like if you took the cadets out for a field trip somewhere or incurred expenses to take them out. It can't be like, I know we've used meals before, training aids. I know before, like when we bought laptops for the cadets to use to teach their lessons in the classrooms, they used to allow that. We just submitted another one of the receipts like back just recently, and they disallowed it, saying they don't cover that anymore. So we're not, it looks like they changed their policy. If you have to pay rent for your facilities or you have to rent anything, that's an eligible expense. So those are, and if you took the cadets out swimming, for example, and you paid the swimming pool their fees for every cadet, that would be a deductible, an eligible expenditure for reimbursement. So it'll be just a matter, usually you just provided those receipts to your CO officer, and then the CO would submit them to Winnipeg for reimbursement. And then this was a difference. If you're incorporated, you got usually the money was direct deposited into your bank account. If you're not incorporated, this is where for some reason D&D has a rule where they can't give money to a non-incorporated entity. So that's where the money went to Richard at the provincial league, and then Richard would cut you a check to your local squadron for the LSA money. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And so you were saying, sorry, could you step back a moment where you're talking about the CEO would submit
Yes.
Expense receipts?
Yeah, usually you would need to provide the CEO with the receipts, and it would be up to him to fill out the D&D form that would allow him to claim the reimbursement on behalf of the squadron from D&D.
And that's after the money's already been given to the squadron?
No, this would be before. You need to get,
Okay.
like, for example, just now, they were asking for like receipts from April 1st until the current time. They're looking for receipts for reimbursement.
The receipts have to say paid also. They can't just be a bill.
Yeah, sometimes they even ask for proof of payment too. They sometimes come back and say, can you show us the canceled check for this?
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I know it's kind of tough for a lot of squadrons this last time around. I know at 41, we submitted a bunch of receipts that we normally thought we should be able to submit from based on previous years. And they came back and basically $9,000 of receipts got dwindled down to about 400 or 500 of eligible reimbursements. They kind of basically denied a lot of receipts. And the biggest thing was, I don't think they said this at first, but basically they're only allowing receipts since April 1st. And I'm not sure about the other squadrons, but I know at 41, we've been shut down for 6 of those 8 months since April 1st. So we hardly have any receipts to submit. We haven't done anything. And where we spent some money on, like we invested in some virtual training platforms so that we could at least have virtual classes every week. D&D denied those expenses. They said, well, we're not covering the cost of computer licenses for virtual software to run classrooms, even though they're encouraging us that that's what we need to do as an activity. So I'm not sure what's happening. I know there are some squadrons, maybe not so much in Saskatchewan, but in other provinces like Alberta, they have massive rent bills that they're bleeding money, and I'm not sure if they're trying to allocate money more towards them to help out with rent. They did provide some extra money just for rent earlier this summer. So the key thing is just to come up with receipts and give them to your CO, and your CO will likely know what to do. They get regular correspondence from their chain of command with instructions to submit receipts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just go and do it because this is where it is a source of free money basically for the squadron. That you don't, as long as you're eligible, you'll get the money from D&D.
Okay, so this is different than the money that's allocated to squadrons based on their head count of cadets. Is that correct?
Okay, that's more of an expense for the squadrons. That would be the assessment fee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, usually like the province will charge you an assessment fee after the national organization gives the province an assessment fee on per head cadet basis.
Okay, I'm not knowledgeable in that.
Yeah, it's a bill that you get in the spring. That's where like there's an assessment fee of so many dollars per cadet charged each year to help cover the cost of provincial and national activities.
Okay.
I think this is Heather from 606. I think what you're thinking of there is it is kind of based on your enrollment in the squadron, the LSA. The larger the squadron is, the more LSA will be available to your squadron. So in that sense, it is kind of determined by the number of cadets that you have.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's ever a specific dollar amount that's said you have 20 cadets, so you get $20 per each of them. The larger squadrons do get more LSA funding.
Yeah, that's maximum funding they can receive, but they still have to provide the receipts in order to get that funding. It's not automatic.
Correct, yes.
So is there something in addition to the assessment fee where we are paying an expense as a squadron for each cadet? Is there something besides this LSA money that D&D provides an amount per cadet that's in the squadron?
No, I don't believe, not a direct payment to the squadron.
No, okay.
But the LSA is the only direct payment D&D gives that I know of, unless it's special money that comes out like because of COVID. They've been doing a few extra things over the summer.
Okay, great, thank you. That's good, thank you.
Yeah, another form here is a volunteer tracking form. I know some squadrons, they might want to keep track of how many hours each parent volunteers for. So there is a form available here if your squadron wants to keep track of that. I know this sometimes can be a challenge, keeping track of hours, but it is an option. Like some squadrons might say, well, to help cover the cost of the program, you need to volunteer X number of hours during the training year. This is something you can use to keep track of that. And this is just an aid. It's not mandatory to use this. You could even set up your own more detailed Excel spreadsheet that might meet your purpose more, where you can break down the hours by activity that you have. Now, in the version before this, they used to have more sheets here. They used to have like an expense claim, a deposit claim form, and a few other documents that I thought were quite useful, but I'm going to check to see what happened to those documents. I think they had some complaints where they thought it was too much, but again, these were all forms that were voluntary to use. You didn't have to use them. But I know just from my experience with 41, some of those forms are quite nice. It basically allowed paying for expense reimbursements on behalf of executives or officers who paid for some things personally. There was a deposit form where you could keep detailed track of not just how much you deposited, but what it was for. I'm going to pull them out of the earlier versions because I might distribute that as a separate spreadsheet because some of those forms were quite useful. So now the red buttons, these are the actual ACC 9 form that you need to submit to us after your year end. This is just a cover page. Once you put in the date, it'll fill in the proper date here.
Shrink your page, please.
Pardon?
Shrink your page so we can see the tabs on the bottom.
Oh, okay. Can you see
Perfect.
it?
Yep.
Yeah, so you got the tabs here cover. The page one, I'm going to just try to zoom this here so it's easier. This is just information about the squadron, basically what province you're in, your squadron number and name, your mailing address, who's completing the form, the best time to call them if there's questions. That'll likely be me phoning with questions if that's the case. It's asking, are you a registered charity? Yes or no. If yes, what is your registration number? And this is where, just be aware, last year we went through, as part of the reorganization, about 12 squadrons who was using the National Air Cadet League's charity number got assigned their own specific number. Now, I sent that information out last spring, but you may want to just double check you're not getting a number from an old letter or old documentation. It should have been updated. And if you want to make sure, just contact me and I can get you the updated number. Then if you're incorporated, you'll have a registration number, which should match up with your charity number if you have that. That's one of the other changes we made. So the two should be matching up now. And then it's asked, like, did you submit your charity return last year? Yes or no. This section is for me to sign. Your signature is on one of the latter pages. Now, most of this information would be automatically carried forward. This is your revenue side. It takes all the information from that revenue transaction sheet and brings it over to here. Same thing with the expenses. It brings forward all your expenses. Now, just to give you an idea, wherever it says available, these are customized headings that you can change yourself. So you can always add your own expense headings. Just try to keep it relevant to the appropriate topic, because this does make a difference when it prepares the charity return automatically. Because if you happen to put squadron activities under administration expenses, that will distort the totals. Because CRA, part of the charity group, they don't want to see a nonprofit spending 80% of their money on administrative purposes. They want to see typically like 80 or 85% of the money being spent on activities directly related to the nonprofit. So this is where it's important to categorize your expenses properly. Then the next page is the balance sheet. This is where, again, it should carry forward most of the information over from the input sheets. Based on your first sheet where you entered your beginning data, it'll bring it up here. It'll do the calculations based on all your entries, telling you what your current balance should be for your bank account. This is where you'll find out if your bank account's not actually matching up with your actual bank balance. That usually means there's something missing, and then you have to kind of go back and make sure you included everything. Fixed assets, this is something, in the accounting world, you're going to come across a lot of different ways that accountants like to display this. With the Air Cadet League at the national level, they want us to put down like $1 for everything. Basically, they're treating it as if all expenditures, capital or non-capital, is an expense, a current year expense for the squadron. So basically, they just want us to list everything at $1. So when you buy, say, a new computer for your officers, that computer is just written off as an actual expense during the year. But then there's a sheet here for inventory, and I'll get to that in just a moment. That's where you can actually list all your assets. And then at the bottom here, there's this one green box. This is where it's going to tell you, are you in balance or not? Theoretically, it should be 0, or you should just see a dash here. That means it's perfectly balanced. If it's only a couple dollars out of balance, odds are it's because of this fixed assets where you're entering everything for $1. But if it's something more than just a couple dollars, that means there's probably an entry mistake earlier before. I know a common problem is your beginning balances don't match up with your actual bank beginning balances. I've seen that happen a lot. They're off for some reason. Maybe they forgot to account for an uncleared check when they entered their beginning balances. It could be a number of reasons, but this is where we have to try to go back and figure out where the mistake came in. And then finally, the last page, this is where another part of your duty as treasurer is to keep maintaining a list of all the assets that your squadron owns. This doesn't include assets that are owned by D&D. D&D is responsible for looking after those. But anything that the parent committee or the sponsoring committee has to buy, this is where you would make a list of that here. The odds are you're not going to have an aircraft. That's usually a provincial responsibility. Some squadrons do own their own building, though. So this is where you would list it. And they want to know what your purchase price is and what the estimated insurance replacement cost is. If you have vehicles, I know there's one squadron, I think, that has a bus that I know of for sure. Office equipment is probably more common, sports equipment, photography equipment. This is probably more common equipment your squadron's likely to have. This is where, if like in the case of computers, try to record the serial number, because this is all going to come in handy when you look at getting insurance for this equipment. This is where a lot of squadrons don't realize that it's their responsibility to get insurance for the things that your squadron owns. Over the last couple of years, we've had some squadrons where they let their insurance lapse and they had a break-in and they lost a lot of their equipment. And basically they had no insurance to cover the cost. So it's good from an insurance point of view to keep this list up to date. And so that way, when you go to get your insurance policy each year, you could just provide this to the insurance company and they can give you the quote. And then if anything did happen, you would have all the information at your fingertips, including things like serial numbers and such, for whichever equipment that applies to. Now, the forms in blue, this is more other planning worksheets. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail, but like the charity return, this is where you can't just print this out and submit it, but it gives you all the numbers you need to transfer over to the actual CRA form. Basically, it breaks everything down and it gives you a dollar amount. So it makes your job a little bit easier filling out that form. Okay, this is a 9-8. Yeah, this is again part of the charity return. This is related to that part. They're trying to calculate what percentage of your money is spent on admin cost versus actual activity cost. Yeah, one of the abuses they're trying to prevent from happening is someone setting up a nonprofit, receiving a bunch of money as donations, and then giving it all to themselves as wages for admin costs. They don't like that too much. And if it turns out that you have an unusually high admin cost percentage that you can't explain, you would run the risk of losing your charity number. Then there's a tax rebate. Again, if you filled out the GST, the GST rebate's filled out every 6 months. Yeah, in this case, they have it every quarter, but I believe it's, unless they changed it again. But I know before it was you apply every 6 months for the GST rebate. So this can be this can actually pay for a good chunk of your review bill if you need to get a review done. Then finally, at the end of the year, it gives you your end of year data that you need to report on your next year ACC 9. So you could just take this information and transfer it manually into the next year's ACC 9 form. And then it gives you a budget, like an estimated budget for next year. You could use this as a planning tool. And then you just make your changes based on what you think is going to happen over the next 12 months. So this is kind of a summary of the ACC 9 form.
Brian, can you go back to the first input page, please?
The very first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, yeah, data setup. A number of the squadrons have more than one bank account, and at the top in the 1010, 1020, 1030, 1040, they used to be able to put each account, change that to each account. You can't change those four.
Here, like the 1050 to 1090.
Put it in there instead then.
Yeah,
okay.
You would just have to rename them and
okay.
Give it an account number.
Okay.
Same thing with liabilities.
Yeah.
Use any of these accounts for additional liability accounts. But hopefully most squadrons shouldn't have too many liabilities outside of a credit card, which should be paid off at all times. If you have a building, they might have a building mortgage. That would be, you would set that up here then.
Yeah. Good.
Any other questions? Well, one thing, I think, what time are we at here? 3 o'clock. We've been doing this for about an hour and a half. What, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen here. There, see if CO or see if there's any questions here. Okay, yeah, that's where Heather was commenting that the CO shared a document. Yes, there is the officers should have received a memorandum. In fact, there was a memorandum, I believe it was around September 20th or so, that listed the current criteria for what the LSA money was for. Because I know back in the spring, there was a document that the officers gave me, and one of the eligible expenditures was the league assessment fees, which never used to be an eligible expenditure before. So I was completely shocked when I saw that. But that's where, when we submitted our assessment fees for 41 this year, it got quickly rejected. And when I tried to do a bit more research, one of our junior officers gave me a document from September that, yeah, it clearly said no assessment fees on it. Okay, so I'm going to just probably wrap up today's session. We've talked a lot here. I don't want to overwhelm you too much. But one thing, if you could put in the chat box, if there's any other topics you're interested, or if there's anything you want to go into more detail on, and because I'm planning to have these sessions probably on a monthly basis for the next few months to help squadrons with their various financial issues. So this is probably what I'll do is the first half of the meeting will be talking about a specific topic, and then the second half would be more like a question and answer section or dealing with individual issues. So if there's anything you can think of right now, like if you want to go into more detail into the ACC 9, actually there is a manual. They actually, with this new version, they actually released a fairly good manual that talks about the whole accounting process from the air cadet side of things, along with the how to enter information into the ACC 9 form. I'll make that available. I'm going to be sending out a link. I'm creating a web page where I'm going to have a lot of these resources all together where you could download them from. Yeah, no, I can definitely get some of those older forms. And because I know some of them are quite relevant. I heard through the grapevine that there was a couple of provinces that were complaining about too much forms. Personally, I thought that they were perfect, especially for a lot of small squadrons that don't have the time or resources to make up their own forms. So I'm going to try to get them available. It'll probably be in a separate spreadsheet, but I'm going to try to have them, or I need to make sure that I'm allowed to do that though. I'll try to know why they were removed, and if I can pass them on, I will. Okay, we got a request like talking about the criteria for charitable receipts, and we can definitely do that for one topic. And yeah, Larry, we can take a look at, we can share your screen afterwards and see if I can try to find out what the problem is with yours. Any other comments or requests for future topics?
Just Holly from number 40 again. The email that you sent out originally, I think it only went to our secretary. I don't know if it went to anybody else. So I was just wondering for your email groups. Like I'm not sure how it got sent out because I didn't get it as the treasurer. The secretary sent it to me.
By any chance, do you use the Provincial Air Cadet League email addresses?
Yes.
Okay, because I sent it out to both all the chairs, treasurers, secretaries, and I forget
Okay.
one more. But this is what we find is some people haven't been using them on a regular basis.
Oh no, I use that as a primary. For Air Cadet activities, I prefer that is the one that's used.
Okay. Well, if you want to, and this applies to everybody, enter your email address. That's the best address for you. And I can make sure I'll create a specific list just for this for these calls. And
Okay.
I'll add your individual emails to the distribution list as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's part of the issue we had trying to communicate with squadrons. We've been encouraging squadrons for the last 3 years to use that SKACL email address just so that we can get messages out. But I think, our tech person did a survey. I think it was only like 1/3 of the squadrons were actively using the chair address. Another third, I think, was using it, but they were only checking it once every 4 or 5 months. And then a batch of squadrons that didn't use them at all.
And come August, there's a lot of times we send emails out to help you get started with new information. That's why it has to be something you use.
Yeah, this is something, like I said, we had a directors meeting last Tuesday, and all the directors have been given their marching orders to contact their squadrons and to get this contact information for us. So if this is where hopefully someone within your squadron is going to get contacted, we can get an updated list.
Oh, that brings me to my next question. Do you know if a new director has been assigned for the number 40 squadron?
I don't think as far as I know, I don't think so. They're looking at alternatives.
Okay.
I know Curtis Bousfield, he said he would help out, like if you needed help with the elections. Were you
Yeah.
people on the call there? Yeah.
Sorry.
Like Curtis Bousfield indicated he would help out with the election part.
Yes, I was on the call on Tuesday. Yeah.
So, but I don't think Curtis will be the director though.
Okay.
But 2 or 3 other squadrons, and he's also the vice chair as well. So
Oh, wow.
don't think he'll be the squadron, but they're probably going to come up with someone fairly quickly here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, if not, thank you everyone for coming on board to our first treasurer meeting. I'm pleased with the attendance. I'm going to have to tease our chairperson, Gary, a bit. I think I got more people on board here for today's meeting than we had for our community meeting last week. But this is where, again, I know one of my goals with these sessions is trying to get information out, especially to the treasurers, but to anyone on the executive who's involved, just to kind of get them informed of what their reporting requirements are. Because this is where I can easily see how there's a lot of forms that need to be submitted to different agencies. It's very easy for a new slate of executive to come on board. And if they weren't told much by the previous executive, they could easily miss out on a filing date. And this is where we're trying to minimize that. And this is one of the ways I want to try to minimize it. It's just having these regular sessions and keeping you informed of things. Final comment, with this COVID and the uncertainties, if there's any kind of financial issues that your squadron's being faced with, or other issues that are becoming urgent, feel free to reach out to executive, either myself or Richard at the office, or Gary or Curtis. Feel free to reach out to any of the executive. And no matter what the issue is, just let us know about it. It's a lot easier for us to try to fix something before it becomes even worse of a problem. And with this COVID, yeah, we're recognizing that some squadrons are going to have issues of different types. And we at the provincial level, we want to work with the squadrons to help overcome these issues so that by the time things get back to normal, we still have a functioning program. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any kind of issues that you need help with.
Thank you very much, Brian. I really enjoyed the event today. It was very informative. I'm more dangerous now. I know less. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just more dangerous now.
Well, I'm glad you found it useful. And this, if you want to, you feel free to come back tomorrow night. It will be much the same as today's session, just more of an introduction and talking, introducing the ACC 9 form. Yeah, I'm trying to have, like when I do these sessions, have one like on the weekend and one in the evening during the week, based on different people's availability. And then hopefully the recording works still. It's telling me I'm recording to the cloud, so as long as the meeting is active, it should still be recording. On the webpage I'll be developing, I'll have links to all the recordings as well.
Do you have an estimate when you might have that web page available?
Oh, it'll likely be this week. Probably
okay.
Middle of the week here.
Okay.
And I'll send an email out as soon as I got everything up and going. It'll be kind of a similar format to what I did for the annual general meeting for Saskatchewan. There was kind of a web page where you could download all the documents, and I had some of the ACC 9 materials there. I just need to update the spreadsheet. So it'll be something similar to that, where you just go there and it'll be kind of like a one-stop center where you can download or view these various resources.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And I look forward to seeing you the next time we do one of these sessions.
Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Bye,
Brian.
everyone.